Hello. Welcome to this week's edition of the Turning Points podcast. Today was a very calm, content, peaceful, and enlightening conversation with Devavani. At the end of it, I thanked her for being authentic because I think there were moments, where she, there's some difficult conversations about certain topics and the very vulnerable topics, and I always appreciate when somebody is open to rehash the past, even though they've come to a place of freedom from it, and I feel like she really, even from your reaction, I didn't know her before. You've known her for many years, but you seemed like there was a extremely palpable change from who she was and who she is now, and I mean, she's had some crazy changes in her life since you met her. So it's good to see people be vulnerable
and open. That Devavani I knew as a gifted singer, recording artist, composer, poet, and teacher. I first met her in San Diego when she was the music director of the Spiritual Living Church, and she was that for 17 years. And she's a mother and a grandmother, and she's basically shape-shifted her life of nearly, she's almost 70 now. She shifted it from the needs of her family to her passion. And so this is her story that is, it's very, we enjoyed it. So
very much so.
Yeah. Enjoy Devavani. Oh my, this is a special podcast. Welcome, Devavani.
Hi, Corinne. It's good to see you.
Oh, so lovely to connect with you after so many years. And we've got so much to talk about. We'll just jump right in. So many seekers can recall that point in time when their childhood beliefs no longer worked for them, or their conditioning. So do you remember when you became a seeker?
That's such a great question. And I thought about this. I don't think of myself as a seeker. I was raised in science of mind teaching, in the philosophy of science of mind. Both my parents were involved in studying Earnest Holmes and the science of mind. They started back in the 50s, which is kind of amazing. And my dad eventually became a science of mind minister. But so I was raised in a teaching that didn't have a lot of dogma. And so it actually did work for me. Although as life moved me forward into my young adulthood, I did hit a point after I had gotten married and had my first child, or actually two children, where I wasn't going to church on Sundays at all. And I was really kind of deeply missing and feeling unhappy. And I returned to the church. And so I guess if I was seeking something, it would have been then.
And just to be clear with people, because some people, when you say science, they think Scientology immediately, and it's not that.
I know, and that's why they changed their name to Centers for Spiritual Living.
Yeah, so can you want to describe what sort of the main belief system is? You'd be much better to describe it than myself.
It's based on the writings of Ernest Holmes. He kind of came out of he studied the American Transcendentalist movement, and he studied all the major world religions and found that common thread running through it all, that, as a man thinketh, so is his life. And so change your thinking, change your life was the science, I guess, part of it. But of course, there is a very mystical side, as you know, to all of spirituality. And but the science of mind gave people a way to improve their lives, to improve, to expand on their happiness and their peacefulness, and their, to return to their wholeness if they felt broken. And It's a beautiful path, and it's a beautiful community.
Mm-hmm. And now, did you ever become a minister?
I thought about it, and I decided that my path was in music. And so I started thinking of myself as a minister of music. And that's when I really began working with the Universal Spirit Center in San Diego, California, as their music director for almost 17 years, leading music and singing and creating the music of spiritual community, which I love to do.
And you do it so well. And that's how we met. Probably at least 15, maybe 18 years ago, because I used to come, he used to bring me in to come and sing, at least once a year.
I think you were one of the first.
Yeah. And I loved, it was my favorite church to play because of all of you. I used to play a lot of different ones around the country and even in Canada too. And it was my favorite one to play. It was like coming home when I used to come to San Diego and to you guys. And then we had that Spirit Cafe that we created. Remember that?
I still have the CDs of that.
Yeah. So it was the way what I had this concept like in Nashville. Sean, we have the songwriters in the round, right? Mm-hmm. So there's songwriters. If you go to the Bluebird Cafe, not all the time, but it was created there where the songwriters will sit in the middle of the room instead of being on stage, like you're in their living room, and they'll be in a circle. And so the audience will be around, and sometimes your back is to some people, but then they're super close to other people. And then so I was like, let's do this same thing at the church, but call it Spirit Cafe. And then so we had several of those.
They were such great events, really, really great events. Everybody loved those.
Yeah, there was a great attendance too.
A great attendance, just like being a fly on the wall, in someone's music studio and listening to the banter between musicians, talking about songs, talking about the art of songwriting, where it comes from, and then performing those songs and just kind of moving around the circle of. I think we had two or at least three musicians there at a time.
Yeah, we had that cello player that one time. Yeah. So, okay. And I wanted to go back to just a minute. You got back to the church after you had your first child?
I had two kids.
Had both. Yeah. And actually, that's fairly common of mothers that I know is they kind of, they don't have a chance really to spend time on their own nourishment when they have small children. And then after the child or children are born, they're like, okay, and how do I want to raise these kids? And I want to get back to nourish myself. So was that what it was for you? Did it have anything to do with your kids or more? It was more you for you?
Yes, I think there was just an emptiness in my life, and there was a lack of self-care going on for me. As a mother, as a working mother, because I was working also and going to school at night.
Oh, wow. So it sounds, it's interesting because you're just, the way you described the Science of Mind, which you said they changed their name, but that congregation, it sounds like a very, rooted in mindfulness, mindfulness of your thoughts, mindfulness of how your perspective and actions kind of dictates your path. Is that kind of, am I hearing that kind of correctly, or?
Well, yes. I mean, yeah, it is, of course, based on awareness of your own thinking, your own thoughts, and the fact that you do have a choice in those thoughts. And of course, and then that brings you to the next realization that you get to choose whether you're a victim or you're not a victim of life. And for anyone who's struggled with challenges in life, you know that you have that choice right in front of you. You're either a victim of what happens or you're the co-creator, and you can decide and choose how you want to meet the challenge, whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, that is a very healthy way of being brought up, and so it would make sense why you didn't have a childhood that didn't resonate with you, if that was kind of your center of gravity was that kind of an upbringing, and mindfulness about you have a choice in what you put your attention on, and that changes your experience in life. So because of that, what was that like then going into adulthood? You said you were working, you had a you were working, you were going to school. What were you trying to achieve then at that point in your early adulthood?
I love what you said. Center of gravity. That's perfect. There was very much a center of gravity for me growing up. And that being said, and I came from a very loving, grounded, healthy family dynamic. So my childhood was, my sisters and I often say, that we had the best childhood. We really did. Was happy. And that being said, I was thrown into adulthood because I got pregnant as a teenager. And back in the 60s, 1969 to be exact, when, I didn't know I had any other choice but to be married. And that's what I did. I got married to the father of my child. And we stayed married for a long time. But I got thrown into adulthood basically, and I had to grow up really fast. I left behind, a big chunk of childhood when most people are finishing high school and moving into college and finding out what it's like to live on your own in the world and be the captain of your own ship, so to speak. Well, I was home having babies, as a matter of fact, when Woodstock was happening in New York. I was having a baby experience. So I don't regret any of it. I'm grateful for it. And as an older person, I had to, when I left my marriage eventually, I also had to deal with the grief of a failed marriage, a long-term marriage, and dealing with the grief of having given up so much of myself in the process. And just coming back around to that, this time of life that I'm living in, which I think of as the third, if you divide your lifetime into 3 parts, I'm in the third. And it's been a revelation really to have this much time just for myself, actually for the first time in my life, having this much time to think about what am I going to create during this time of life? Who am I going to be now? Who am I now? I mean, the best question of all. Who am I now?
Yeah. Well, and that's, sorry, Corinne, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if we can back up just a little bit, because I know for me, what happened to me when I realized my marriage was over, it was almost like overnight. Was there anything for you that was a light? Because my light bulb came on like literally one day. I was like, I have a great marriage, like on camera doing like a YouTube thing. I have a great marriage. And the next day, just a light bulb went off and like, my marriage is over. I know it's over. So did you have anything like that?
I've been involved with horses my whole life. And back in, what year was it? About year 2000. I had a very serious horseback riding accident where I fractured my pelvis in 3 places. And I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. It was, a long road to recovery. And there was an incident that happened during that recovery time where, without going into any details, I had like this, when you're in a lot of pain, it's almost like the gift of pain is like you see things so clearly because everything else just falls away. And there's an essence to it. Not that I would wish pain on anyone, but there's an essence to it where I just like, there's no bullshit. There's just no bullshit because there's not enough energy for that.
Yeah.
And my husband came into my hospital room and he complained that the house, that that the morning that I had left to go horseback riding, or the day of my accident, that I had left the house really dirty.
Holy shit.
Oh my.
And he was complaining that he had to do everything. And I know, I look, it's almost funny. It's almost funny, but in that moment, it's like Maya Angelou says, when people show you who they are, you have to believe them. And so he was showing me in that moment who he was, and I'm sure, it's not it's not the final definition of who he is, but in that moment, it was just the most devastating thing he could have said to me.
Yeah.
And it was so, it just like kick a dog when they're down, So I knew in that moment, and my spiritual friends asked me, what did I think? What's the reason for having such a terrible accident and being broken? And I reflected on that, and I was like, wow, this is like the procreative part of my body, my pelvis, my womb, my like my regenerative life force, and that's the place that got broken. And I looked at that and I thought, well, what's really broken? And my marriage is pretty darn broken. And I did not leave right away. I stayed in another 10 years.
Oh, wow. So
But
even after that realization, wow.
even after that realization, I stayed in. But then we went into therapy and counseling, and I was just determined to save it, because I'm not a giver-upper. But there are times that you should just realize the truth and walk away and say thank you, and we're done. But yeah, but I stayed in, and I guess there was just more for me to get for myself. But at the end of 40 years, I knew I was complete.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a long time to have maintained it's one thing to have an unhealthy marriage. It's another thing to be aware that that marriage is unhealthy, or any kind of relationship for that matter, to know it's unhealthy and still try to maintain it. That's a tricky thing, because, you're talking about 30 some years of guilt that's going to dictate, your thought process. And there's going to be so many aspects to that, and how convoluted that can become. It's not so simple to just be like, oh, I realize my marriage is broken. All right. I'm done. That's not the simple, it's not necessarily a simple solution in all cases. And I guess the reason I'm going to ask these questions is because I'm having a similar experience, but from a completely different perspective with my wife. My wife is she's pregnant with our fourth child, and so I'm having a lot of very obvious I don't know, things come up for me, because, I'm taking on more of the duties that she might do, because, she's fucking pregnant and she needs this time to do what she needs to do. And it's funny because, I was doing the dishes the other day, and I'm just like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't know. It's like, but why? What gives me the right to complain? So it's funny that that story, it's not, I was laughing, not because it's funny, but because it's so void of empathy and awareness and, care, for somebody. And that's why I was laughing. So I hope I didn't offend you when I laughed at that, when he said that, but I've been having a similar experience, but from the realization of like, I'm not nearly dealing with as much as she's dealing with. So fucking get over it and, be there,
Right. It's just human. I mean, this being human, as Rumi said, this being human is a guest house. It's just, life is messy.
Yeah.
Life is messy, and I've forgiven my husband, but I did, afterwards, I did what I had been brought up to do, which is to, up my game, to love more, because I thought that I could fix it.
Yeah.
But, I came to realize that that sometimes love is not enough. And I don't like saying that. But in my case, it was true. It just wasn't enough because, the only person you can fix or change is yourself in the final analysis. And I couldn't fix or change the person I was married to. And he didn't decide to change who he was. Maybe he couldn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, even now, it's interesting that you still look that you have that perspective. Not still look at it that way. I didn't mean it that way. I mean, you have that perspective, which is very different than mine. I was just like, it's over. I'm out of here. I mean, it wasn't that cut and clean. It was just in my mind. I knew it was over, and then of course there was conversations, and it was challenging that to come to that and emotional and everything. But I guess my family background is, my mom has been married, 3 times. And she, I've really never wanted to get married. I don't really have a belief system that like marriage is not really that important to me. Sati and I kind of had to get married to be together in order for him to come from India. And so I never had that there was a moment when we decided to get divorced that I was like, oh man, I waited so long. I was 43 when I got married. I waited so long. And now here, I never wanted to be a divorced person. And I was like, no, that's a role. That's a label. That is a human role and a human label. And that doesn't have to be a part of who I am, and so
No, it's just a judgment,
yeah.
And
Yeah.
And even when you said, love is not enough, I think what's interesting is like love is a reflection of unconditional, acceptance and openness and ability for change. And you can project that, you can reflect that out. But somebody has to see that for what it's kind of a two-way thing. You reflect that in each other. And that's, I don't know if it's not enough. Sometimes I just don't think people know how to receive that reflection, or it's just not a compatibility of being able to reflect that back at each other. So it makes sense what you're saying, as kind of obtuse. People say, oh, if you just love somebody hard enough, it'll all work out. That one person can't love enough for 2 people to maintain a healthy relationship.
Well, it takes 2 people to row the boat,
Right.
Well, yeah, and also it's to me, love was totally enough because you loved yourself enough to see clearly. That's the way I look at it.
I'm really glad that you said that because my next thing was, I think the point for me was I needed to love myself more.
Yeah.
It's not I needed to love him more. I needed to love myself more, and that's what I had to find out. And so the whole journey after leaving my marriage, which was 2011, the whole journey since then has just been on loving myself more. And what does that mean, and what does that look like, and how do I do that?
Well, let's talk about that.
What does it look like, and how do you do that?
Yeah. And what does it mean?
So, when I left my marriage, by the way, I didn't think we'd be talking about this today, but that's okay. It's a good topic. When I left my marriage, I found a great little condo in San Diego, in Golden Hill. I love that condo. And one of the really sweet things about living there was the first time I had ever lived alone, ever in my life.
Oh,
I went from living in my parents' house to living with my husband in our house. So I had never lived alone, and I love living alone. I am not one of those people who doesn't like to be alone. I love being alone. But but I remember thinking, wow, I get to decide what I want to cook for dinner, I get to decide what I want, And so that became a question, this was loving myself. Well, what do I want? I was always thinking about what does everybody else want? Well, it's just me here, so what do I want? And it sounds silly, really, but it was just one of the, the awakenings I was having. And then, when the weekend came around, well, what do I want to do? Do I feel like walking over to the farmer's market? Do I feel like, staying inside? Do I feel like calling a friend? It's just, and many people take that for granted, but that had not been at the top of my priority list. I was always taking care of other people in my world. So I got to take care of me. And that was the first step in loving myself. And then moving more deeply into what do I love? What do I want for my life? And what might that be is when I learned how to meditate. I never had Science of Mind did not teach meditation in those years that I was growing up. And I learned to meditate, and that was kind of a revelation, because I never had that experience. And then I went on some spiritual retreats, and I hadn't done that either, and that was new because I went by myself. All these things are just for me. And so I started going to spiritual retreats. I went to Kauai with Michael Stillwater for one of those beautiful, powerful retreats. And so how does one love themselves? Well, you just start by, asking yourself, what feels good to me? What delights my soul? What is it, in this moment that I can feel good about, that I would want to do for myself, or just sit and be.
What delights my soul? I like that. That actually points to there's this non-dualism. We've kind of been exploring that space of awareness, and there's this concept of desires. What is your spirit desire? What is your soul desire? But I like when you said delight. That feels more like a desire feels more like an uncontrollable passion, but like a delight feels like something that fills you up and
or that bubbles up.
That bubbles up and completes you. And I really appreciate that, because there's this concept that I've been, I don't know, meditating on of, what are the things that are innate to our being that are outside of the programming? What drives us, when we get outside of the thoughts that are trying to, take over our actions? When we sit in meditation long enough and we let go of the programming and the identities and all of those things, there's still a force that moves us out into the world. And when you said what delights your soul, that felt like okay, now that I'm at peace, what is the next thing to do? And I really appreciated that delights. That's a good word.
And there's another piece to that too, because in asking what delights my soul, you automatically touch in to that child within you.
Yeah.
And here's the piece that I had to reconnect to. As I said earlier, I kind of left a big chunk of my childhood behind. That I felt like I didn't get to really have. And so in looking to what delighted my soul, I was reconnecting to that younger version of myself. And it is the child within us that is so present, so aware, so creative, so connected to joy, so interested in play, and and doing the next thing, whatever, what are we going to do now? So that inner child is a really important piece. Someone said to me recently, and I don't know who originally said this, but they said, it's not that you have a soul inside your body. It's like you have a body inside your soul. And And so what delights my soul? Now I'm moving into this soul work. I am a body inside of my soul, and one day this body won't be here anymore. But my soul is always going to carry on. And so there's that soul path that I was just so interested in, so curious about, so open to, what's next? What's my greater yet to be, right? My greater yet to be. And trust me, I've hit those speed bumps where, in the grieving process, in the aging process, in the, just some of the darker shadows of doing our psychological work. I've hit those shadows or those speed bumps where I wondered, is this it? Am I done here? Because grieving feels like dying. Grieving feels like letting go of everything. And then sometimes in that process, I ask myself, is this it? Is it over? Am I actually dying and I'm just kind of watching it happen? But that's part of it. That's part of the journey. The journey back to the self.
Is the parts of you dying?
Yeah. It has to happen. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just can't carry. What is it? Was it Robert Bly? He said, I think he said, when you're young, you have a little black bag and it's tied to your belt there. And, when things happen that are uncomfortable and you don't know what to do, you put it all in the black bag. It just goes in the black. We don't know what to do with that, so we put it in the black bag. Okay, it says by the time you get old enough, that black bag is, tongue twister, is like 10 blocks long and you got to drag it with you everywhere. There comes a moment when you just have to look inside and say, well, I'm going to take care of what's in here.
Yeah, and then you let go of that bag.
I'm just going to let go of this and maybe there's, I'm just going to look and see what's in there. Is there anything that I need to hang on to? And if not, bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah, and at the end of that process, you find out how few things are of your identity. How do I put that? None of those things actually equate to an identity, really. They're just things to possess. And at the end of it, you find out that you're so much less than all of those things because they don't, I'm not doing a good job of explaining it. The sum of those things don't even do justice to the thing you discover you really are. And, they're just these small possessive traits that really don't do your, full spirit justice, but we hang on to them for so long as if they do.
Well, we hang on to all the old identities.
Yeah.
And if you live long enough, you have quite a few identities that you've inhabited.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine.
And sometimes an identity is difficult to walk away from. For example, Corinne knows, I was the music director at a spiritual center for a long time. I had a full-on identity as that person who was there every week making music. And a lot of people were really attached to me being there. Yeah. I had an identity which I enjoyed. I was doing something that I loved. I was good at it. And I didn't, and I felt like I was being of service. And for much of my life, has been about being in service to community. So that identity was precious to me. But I moved to Guam. No, but I let go of that before I moved. But when I left California to come halfway around the world to a tiny dot in the ocean called Guam, I left behind all those identities, and especially that one that I had doing music and being a music minister, and for a community that I really cared about. So that was
a big one.
That was a tough one to leave behind.
Yeah.
And why did you move to Guam? Do you mind me asking?
Well, as I said, I left the job of music director. I think it was 2017, actually. I I was just ready. I was ready. I felt complete with it. And there's been several times in my life where you just get that little tap on the shoulder saying, this doesn't feel fresh anymore. This feels like I've really, checked all the boxes. If I keep doing it, I don't ever want it to become something that feels stale. I don't ever want to, resent my job because I have to do it. I just want it to, there's an aliveness to creative work. And when the aliveness begins to, leak away, it's very noticeable for me. I mean, it's happened to me several times in life, but that time there was at least a year when I was just watching it. I was just watching it and feeling into it. It's like, yeah, it's just not fresh anymore for me. I'm not sure, if I'm supposed to stay. And so I began talking to people about it and talking to my minister. And then I actually made the decision after about a year of sitting with it. And I found an amazing woman who took my place. She's incredible, just so multi-talented. But I felt good about leaving because I left consciously, like leaving the marriage, leaving the job, and I left my teaching job the same way. There was a year when I felt like I don't know if I'm supposed to be teaching anymore because I taught in public schools in San Diego for quite a few years. So that was, it's almost indescribable, but there is a feeling about when something is ready to be over, something's ready to close, you close that door because it's finished and it's complete. And I recognized that feeling and I listened. Like, okay. And I don't, I'm not, my personality doesn't make split second decisions. So I usually sit with things for quite a while. And then if it keeps tapping me, it's like, okay, are you listening?
So then how did you get to Guam though? That was leaving
Okay.
That's okay.
Well,
or is there something in between there?
Yeah, I remarried. I married Donna Lawrence, and she had a history here on Guam. She was in San Diego. She came to be with me. She was actually living here, and then we got together in 2014. And she was living on Guam, but she left her job and came to San Diego to be with me, just to see if we had a relationship that was going to blossom. And so we were in San Diego for 4 years together. We got married in 2016, and then again, the little voice, the little tap on the shoulder. It's like San Diego started to become such a busy place, expensive place to live. We had taken a family trip to France, and we were in a very small village in Provence. My sister lives there, and we stayed for a few weeks and came back to San Diego, and just both of us looked at each other and we said, "Gosh, San Diego is so busy. It's so fast moving. We were really comparing it to that quiet, slower paced village life that we had enjoyed in France, and then come back to California and it's like, wow, maybe it's time for a change." And we both agreed we wanted to live in a smaller place. We wanted to live with a pace of life that was a little more relaxed, a little slower. And so she said, well, they called and offered me my job back because she works for the government here. And they offered her job back to her if she would come back. And she said, should we do it? And something in me just said, yes, let's do it.
And what's it like living there?
It's a beautiful tropical island. It's just what we had imagined for ourselves, being quiet and small and slower paced. Beautiful people here. Donna has a great job, and I am retired.
Nice.
It's like Hawaii. The only thing I'm not really used to, and maybe never will be, is that, if I go outside my door, I, you know, I start sweating right away because it is, it's hot and humid.
That's what you get in tropical weather.
It's
But
tropical.
yeah.
Guam is 13 degrees north of the equator.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool, man.
So, and it is with, technically it's the one island in the world that's the farthest distance from any main body of land.
Wow.
Oh, you're way out there, even further than Hawaii, out in the middle of the ocean.
Yes, if you fly from Hawaii to Guam, you'll be on the plane for 7 hours.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
we're in Micronesia.
Mm-hmm.
Micronesia is north of Australia, south of Japan, east of the Philippines.
Man, and does it feel like a peaceful retreat? Does it feel like you're somewhat disconnected from the chaos of society, or is there enough movement? What does that feel like for you to have been through all of the things that you've gone through, and then 10 years ago kind of start on a deeper spiritual quest of self-reflection, and then to come to this middle of the ocean, furthest from the land mass? What does that feel like?
I was ready for it.
Okay.
I was ready for it. Like I said, I'm in that stage of life which I consider to be the third. I like being quiet. I love our home. We just bought a new home in August. I don't mind being here with myself and my little dog. And you asked me what it feels like. Well, it feels like I finally have, huge amounts of time to be an artist, in a new way that I haven't been before. And so I've been writing, I've been composing, I've been gardening. I just get to be creative in whatever way I want to be creative, and I don't have a job that I need to get to.
Beautiful.
No, I don't have to drive anywhere when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah. And your spiritual journey now, I'd like to hear a little bit about how that's transformed, because I loved how, Science of Mind was your stability. And I really felt that in the way you talked about even seeing the inside of your accident and seeing, that your marriage was broken, your pelvis was, you feel that to me is having a good, strong center, a good way of looking at things. So now what has transpired? Because I know, I have a feeling of where it's gone, but I'd love to hear about it from you, sort of maybe what teachings or teachers what do you sort of, you said you started meditating and sort of what openings you've had spiritually.
It's been a real inward journey. I think my spiritual life now is more about just the stillness and the silence. And I don't currently have any teacher other than my teacher who taught me yoga of the voice, someone that I'm still working with, learning Indian raga and the North Indian classical music, but also composing music and practicing, practicing in my music room. I have a room just for that. So my spiritual path is more, even though I do miss the community aspect, because the community has an energy that is very uplifting. And now I just need to do that for myself, to give myself, like, again, asking myself, what delights my soul? And what has delighted my soul recently has been composing and recording, and learning to use GarageBand.
That's awesome. Sean is a sound engineer and a drummer.
Oh,
yeah. So I understand. I understand that. Well, that deep desire to create. You know, there is an artistic force that comes through us, and you know, my experience with it has been that it's inescapable, but it's not contingent on one job, or you know, yes, I'm an engineer, but that's not my vessel for creativity. I am, you know, artistic, and I am creative, and it happens to be through, you know, recording engineering or drumming or building, or you know, whatever. And so we had a interview with Scott, who was he's a good friend of mine, and we were in a band together for 8 to 10 years, and artists and people who study spirituality are, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of overlap there, because you know, I think to really be honest in a creative activity, you have to sit and be present with whatever is wanting to express itself through you, you know, and it's really getting in touch with that. You know, that well, we call it the muse. You know, you build that relationship with the muse of creativity, and that whatever that force is that's moving you to act or perform or create in whatever, you know, platform. It is a spiritual practice, and it's a mindfulness practice, and it's something that I think it's kind of, you know, we have so much art in our world, right? Everybody has access to the tools to create art, but when there's something that is so undeniably authentic because of how it was created from that, you know, that pure center, it's magic. You know, you just look at it, it's like, that's magic, or you hear it, it's like, that's magic, and you can't really put it in a box.
it is magic. And you can't separate creativity from spirituality. I call it getting the download. You know, when you get the download as an artist, whether you're a writer, a musician, whatever kind of visual artist, it doesn't matter. You know when you're in the hands of something greater than yourself.
Yeah.
You know when something's coming through from beyond. And that's, I wanted to say, to complete my answer to Corinne's question about my spiritual life, that writing has been such an important part of my spiritual awareness, my spiritual movement, my spiritual practice, that when I truly feel that I'm getting closer to the truth, is usually through the act of writing. I mean, sometimes it's in music, sometimes it's in silence, in the meditation, but often, very often, it's in writing.
Well, that's actually what drew me to you, because, you know, we're friends on Facebook. We hadn't seen each other in a long time. And there was a couple of writings that you posted that I could just feel your soul speaking so authentically. And that's what drew me to ask you to come on the podcast.
Yes, I have that piece of writing in front of me, actually. Would you like me to read it?
Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
Please.
Oh, thank you. So this was the piece you responded to, Corinne. It's called, I guess if I was going to give it a name, it would be called On Leaving. I left the horse life, the church life, the teacher's life, the married life. Left home, left my town, my country, community, and friends. I pulled up roots gently, walking away from the familiar, the beloved, the history of my past. From childhood haunts, from place, people, things. From trainings and degrees, performance stages. Sorry.
Say, take it back one line, because we'll be able to edit that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
from place, people, things, from trainings and degrees, performance stages, classrooms, and houses, freed of all expectation, predictability, from every old idea of myself with layers of conditioning and tradition melting away. I dropped the burden of my responsibility to others, to answer the whispered sighs of my own neglected heart, asking, if not now, then when? So I answered with gratitude and goodbye. Farewell, desert mountains, soft beaches, farewell, tribe. Until we meet again, nothing is wrong. I love you. Gazing ahead into the unseen unknown, I could feel the future. I felt her breathing, closed my eyes, felt the stillness beckoning, listened to the waves moving and the gates swinging open, followed the secret sound until time chose my moment, and I leapt. That was about writing about my move here to Guam.
That's really beautiful.
A lot of letting go. There's a lot of letting go in that.
Yeah.
Deeply, deeply felt. And I mean, what comes to mind is neti neti, the path of not this, not that. And it seems almost crude to even mention that after such a beautiful writing, but it is, to me, the neti neti, not this, not that, is letting go of all the labels and all the ideas we have. And I think, well, there's so many favorite lines in that, but I love the letting go of the people, like what was it, the desire to please, or the to be there for people, or whatever it was. That's so,
The burden of responsibility to others.
yes, the burden of responsibility to others. And it's like, you know, that's just deeply, deeply felt, because some people would, the ego would say, oh, but we have, we have to look after each other. But looking after each other happens automatically. Compassion and empathy come from that deeper place when we let go of what we think we should be doing, and just do it. It's a completely different energy.
Yes, then the word should, gives that away.
Yeah.
So we let go of the should.
Yeah.
I should be caring for others. I should be contributing to society. I should have a job. I should. I think, it's not that I want to walk away from caring for my family or caring for my wife or, caring for my community here, because that's important to me, to show compassion and care for the people that I love, and to show the same level of compassion and care to myself.
Yeah.
And so that I'm taking time here for myself. You're really catching me in my life. You're catching me in this interesting place it's like a gap. It's like a gap between, what I left behind and what I may be moving into. And in that gap, there's just a lot of spaciousness. I'm really not trying to do anything. I'm not marketing myself. I'm not selling anything. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not, trying to pick up threads from what I used to do and see if I can make that happen here. And I did try when I got here to do some of my community work here, and it didn't flower the way I wanted it to. So when pandemic hit, that was my perfect time to just say, okay, I'm just letting go of everything, letting it just drop. And I want to see what's here. what's here when I'm not trying to make anything happen? What is here for me when I'm not moving away from this place here in my center, when I'm just being still and I'm being with myself and I'm asking and I'm listening, doing a lot of listening, and what's here. So that's what the gift of the pandemic has been for me. And what's starting to rise to the surface is the writing that I've done all my life since high school. I started writing poetry, and I'm a journal. I've got closets full of old journals that I've written, and just that's what seems to be rising up for me now. And I'm curious about what I'll do with that.
Well, and it's funny as you're talking about that space and the not trying to do anything, the not trying to force an activity or something based on the shoulds or the expectations of really any layer of life. It takes a level of bravery to embark into that space. And I know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that'd be like, well, that doesn't take anything. I can go do nothing right now. It's like, but can you do nothing and sit in the silence? Can you do nothing and sit in that silence? Because I can imagine when you first, and I'm going to project this on you for a second, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I can imagine when you first entered that space of your life, it wasn't necessarily all that comfortable. It was something that maybe you had to grow into, or was it that simple?
I mean, like you said, yeah, you can pay me to do nothing. I'll do nothing.
Yeah.
Like the dream of every working person.
Right.
So, but as a person who's been a doer,
yeah,
and a creator all my life, I'm going to be, like, in a couple of years, I'm going to be 70. So all my life has been about doing and creating, raising a family, working, having, teaching, singing, leading, being a leader in community. Wow. I mean, and I loved all of it, but I'm not trying to do that here.
Yeah.
And I keep coming back to the word, curious. And I think I'm just curious about what is the essence of this time now for me? What is the essence of who I am now? And how can I tap into that more deeply? And how can I bring that forth into some artful form that pleases me, that delights my soul, and perhaps can be offered in the world? I don't know. I mean, it's like when you're an artist, isn't this the question for every artist? Like, is what I'm doing, songwriting, singing, painting, writing, is what I'm doing for me, or is it for the world? And I think the answer is sometimes it has to be both, but it's always about tapping into your source of inspiration and nurturing the connection you have to the beyondness of life, to that greater soul that you're inhabiting, that has mysteries yet to unfold and to reveal that we just don't know. And until you sit with that and listen, you aren't going to know what's going to move through you. And then when it does come in those divine downloads, that's like, oh yeah, I got to write that down, or I've got to sing that song. Is it for me, or is this something to share? And I usually do end up sharing. As Corinne said on Facebook, I shared a couple of things. In singing, I made a recording and shared that. But it's the artist's path that It has to come through you. So it's very personal in that sense.
Mm.
But then what you do with it is, that's a different kind of listening. Like, where does this belong in the world?
Yeah.
Who's it for?
Yeah, that takes a lot of patience. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Corinne.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that to me, what I've is like, it's like the universe is, it's like the what comes through us comes through us. It doesn't belong to us, but it comes through us and is very fulfilling and enjoyable. And then if it's meant to be in the world, it will find, that's my philosophy, is it'll find a place in the world. And sometimes it's finding a place to 5 people, and sometimes it's 50 and 500 and 5,000 and 5 million. And I don't know that that's up to us. That's how I've always created anyway. I've just always like, okay, whoever's drawn to this, I created it, came through me. I didn't know if I created it, it came through me. Giver of the Gifts, that song we were talking about before we started recording, that song was absolutely came through me. It was already written when it came to me. And yeah, and I have never been attached to like who hears it or what happens to it, or
You can't be. I mean, when you put it out in the world, it's with an open hand. I mean, you can't hold on to it. It goes where it goes.
Yeah.
And like you said, Corinne, I do believe that. It's not, when things come through you in that way, it is, it doesn't belong to you.
That's what takes, that's I think in a lot of cases the harder part about our artistic expression is, if you've had an enjoyable experience creating art, which I imagine you have, it just flows. You just turn on, right, and you're buzzing, and you're just totally high from that experience, and then in most cases you're asked to let go of that then, and that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of patience to have such a very intimate experience with the creative process, and then also recognize that that creation doesn't define you either. That's not you. It's happening through you or happening to you, but then you have to let it go to whatever is asked of you to let it go to, and that's a lot. And that's why I said, you can be alone, but can you be alone and in the silence? Because that continuation of letting go, it never stops. You just develop maybe a healthier relationship with letting go, I suppose.
And the minute that you let go, it's almost like you're on to the next thing. When something comes through you, it really works. It really works in you. I mean, and when you're in the creative flow, there's so much happening on an energetic level, and then you're in that beautiful flow of creation, and it's like it lights you up from the inside out, and then you create something, and you finish it, and you put it out into the world, and at that point I'm really done with it. You let it go, and then it's on to the next thing as an artist, right?
Exactly.
It's so interesting. And people, like my wife, listens to my music all the time, but I don't listen to things that I've done.
Yeah.
I don't. When I finish it, I do a lot of listening while I'm creating, but gosh, when I'm done with it, I'm done.
On to the next thing, like you said. Yeah.
So I'm curious, having been in a relationship for so long, and then having that relationship not be, I don't want to demean it and say successful, or it wasn't compatible anymore, and that required you to move on in your life. What has been your experience with now being in a new relationship that I imagine is I don't want to say accepting, as if but that cultivates what you need in your life, and is open and empathetic to your process now and the space you're not required of, but the space that is beckoning you. What is that like to have that kind of relationship now?
That my relationship now is incredibly freeing. I went from being married for 42 years to a man, and then in 2016 I married a woman. And it's, for me, I've never considered myself a gay person, but and I still don't actually, because I really,
That's funny.
it's
Sorry.
really odd, right? But it was the person I married, the soul of
Hmm.
my wife now, Donna, who's just an incredible human being, and she wants her greatest desire for me is just for me to be happy, for me to be free, for me to do what pleases me, what brings me joy, um, and she had, if you knew Donna, you would recognize right away that she's just a really big light.
Hmm.
And I wasn't looking for another relationship, to be honest with you. I was very happy to be single. Because remember, I said I hadn't lived alone ever in my life. I was living alone for a couple of years, and then because of housing cost, I lived with a roommate, another woman, another artist, singer, songwriter person, and we shared a space. And but I was happy. I didn't feel like anything was missing. As a matter of fact, nothing was missing for me. And then someone that I had known for, as a friend for a long time, kind of came back into my world, and there was an energy there. There was a spark there that I didn't want to ignore, and I was curious about it. And evidently, she was feeling the same thing. So my roommate plays those big symphonic gongs, to do the gong
Hmm.
meditation, the
Yeah.
sound meditation. So she did one of those for the two of us in the tiny little space that we were living in. And this was the only time I've done several of these gong meditations, but this was the only one where I had this really powerful vision. My eyes were closed, and somewhere halfway through the sound meditation, I see these two hands, like these hands coming down from above. And I remember thinking, well, that's kind of curious. What in the world is that? I was just watching it. And here comes these two hands, and I'm watching, and they come down to where my heart is, and they began to just lift off this, what looked like armor. Okay, so lifting off the armor off my heart. And I thought, well, I'm not making this up. This is something that I saw. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I didn't know that I had armor on my heart.
Hmm.
I didn't. Evidently, I did. And Donna was in this meditation, and she felt she had a different experience. But in her experience, she was like first going way down deep inside the earth, and then rising way up into the universe, and then coming and back down. And in her vision, she was seeing the two of us sitting together on the couch, sharing at a really deep heart level. And so that was actually the moment when we both kind of saw each other in a new way.
That's amazing. That's a wonderfully enlightened perspective of relationships, I think, and I appreciate that that's where you're coming from, because it kind of it's in line with you letting go of identities and not being attached to an identity and say, well, I never identified it as a gay person, and here I am married to a woman. There's a I think the lower perspective would say, well, then you're gay. Well, it's like, well, that's only if you're looking at that level of it. And I had a really powerful experience. My cousin married his husband, I guess, last February. So it's almost been a year now. And there was a point when they were doing their vows when his husband Norm, said, I think he was 42. My cousin's 34. He said, I never knew for sure that I'd be able to experience the kind of life I'm experiencing now, where I get to love somebody freely, live a life with them, have this marriage. I never thought that was going to be possible for me. And, it was really powerful because you could just see, kind of what you're talking about, where take away the identities and the genders and the everything surrounding this. These two people are meant to be together, and they are so compatible, even though they're so different. And my cousin's, it sounds like he's like your wife. This guy is just the brightest light that you've ever seen in a person. And to hear them exchange vows and be so, you can tell that they see each other completely and clearly. And it was funny because there was a lot of, family members that are, older and not necessarily comfortable with that. And, it was just an opportunity to be like, you're not seeing what's happening here. If you are uncomfortable with what's happening here, it's because you are not seeing what's happening here. And what's happening here is a genuine union of two people going through with commitments to each other, regardless of what that means or what it sounds like socially. So I guess I appreciate that you're like, I call it what you will. This is what it is for me and for her. And it sounds like it's an incredibly fruitful experience for you.
Yeah, we're pretty good together. We make a good team. We balance each other. She's very gregarious, very extroverted, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm the introvert, basically.
Oh, I'm so thrilled, and we're going to wrap it up with it because this is a beautiful. I mean, there's been so many beautiful points, and Devavani, I feel like you have shared some really beautiful, intimate, and important aspects of your journey that I feel just honored to hear and be you're sharing with us. And I know that it'll help, people who listen as well. Because that's, what we do is we're all one, we're all in this together. And your journey is we're all having the same journey of being this messy humans, as you put it earlier.
Well, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's been a joy for me to be with you. And we covered a lot of ground: marriage and relationships and divorces and children and art and creation and, spirituality. So these are the turning points that are the biggest ones, I think, that people experience. And I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for all of it. Grateful for my life, all of it. I wouldn't change anything.
Beautiful. And will you share with me the written version of that? I'm be interested maybe in adding that to
Sure.
adding that to the show notes along with your bio and stuff. I think that'd be nice to have written down. So thank you very much. It's wonderful to see you again. And blessings until we meet again.
Thanks, Corinne. Nice to meet you, Sean.
Oh, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciated you. And we're in the say more section after Corinne just made fun of me for having a long-winded intro, because we normally do the intro after we do the interview. And yeah, I did. I had a long-winded intro because I was moved to have a long-winded intro. And what's funny is we got on the topic about how we're somewhat reversing our roles to a certain degree. And I said that I don't have a lot to say, and you laughed profusely. And then I said, well, it's not that I can't have a lot to say. I'm allowing this space to be invited to share instead of just vomiting my opinion. But this is part of my podcast, so this is my only platform where somebody is actually giving a shit to hear what I have to say. So sometimes it gets a little out of hand. That being said, That was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, it was so great to connect with her after all these years. I met her in San Diego probably back in about 2003, I would think it would be, after I left the Chopra Center, 2004 maybe. And yeah, I used to sing at the church there that she was the music director of. And we had a lot of good times. I knew her husband and her kids. And then haven't seen her in probably about 10 years now, and saw that posting on Facebook of that beautiful writing that she
Hmm.
read during our interview with her. She read. I was thrilled that she had that ready to read, and
Yeah.
that was why I had reached out to her. I read that and I thought it was so powerful and poignant and authentic, and just so many things, just beautifully written and heartfelt. I could feel that was her soul speaking, the
Yeah.
delight of her soul speaking. And so I reached out and said, I'd thought about her for the podcast before, but that was the moment where I was like, I'm reaching out to her to see if she'd like to join us in conversation. So it was a treat for me. And yeah, when she came on, I haven't seen her in 10 years, and the aura of who she is, the essence of who she is, seems, it's not that she is different, but it seems like she's more like grounded in who she is.
Hmm.
She was always a really grounded and kind and, wonderful person to be around. But now I feel like she's just really found the bliss of her own being, and she is that, emanating that. That's what I felt from her. So I could feel like a palpable difference.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. It was a really, it was a powerful reflection of, how dynamic and changing life can be. Um, especially, I think it resonated with me in a lot of ways because, I feel like I felt her sense of not even acknowledging her authentic self, or not even acknowledging that there was that, because she was, I don't want to say trapped in life, but she was in the motions of what life was begging of her. And that was her, her family, her husband. And so much of her life was given up to cater to other people's needs. And again, I think this came up in the conversation. Neither one of us are saying that we shouldn't cater to other people's needs. It's just, I think so often we become imbalanced, and we have a sense of obligation from programming or for expectations to only take care of others' needs, as if that's
At the sacrifice of your own.
It's the
And
sacrifice.
as she put it, there's a should, because even you had said
Yeah.
shouldn't take. And every time you have a should in front of something, you're shoulding all over yourself, basically.
Yeah.
And so she naturally, it's part of her nature to be nourishing and to be in community. But now she's doing it from a place of fullness within her own being, which we've talked about that on other podcasts. That's what I'm feeling like I'm doing much more in my life now. Is from the outside looking in, it might look like I'm still doing singing and writing and doing the podcast and all that stuff. But I'm just doing it now because it's the thing to do. It's not because I'm looking to fulfill something, or I have a great desire to write a great memoir or anything. It's nothing like that. It's just creativity and flowing each day.
Yeah, it's funny. The two things that came up for me about this. I told her about when that story of when she had broken her hip and she was in the hospital, and the first thing, or I'm sorry, yes, and the first thing her husband says to her is how messy she left the kitchen before she got into her accident, and it's like, I think that showcases. It showcases how disconnected we can become from each other, and how in our own bullshit we can become. Even, and I find that that's why I shared with her about kind of where we're at, where Meg's having, she's exhausted. She's 36 and pregnant with our fourth child, and it's been a lot more at more of an energy cost to her, and she's not been well at all. And
you bought and sold a house and moved.
And we bought and sold a house
while
and moved.
she was in her first month of pregnancy.
Yeah, her first trimester of pregnancy. Yeah, and so naturally there's a change in the dynamic of what we do then in sharing household chores and all that kind of stuff, because it's not just about, well, you do this, I do this, and so, but I was cleaning the dishes the other day, and I was mad that I was cleaning the dishes. I wasn't coming from that space where it's like, she should be here. It's like, I just didn't want to be doing it, and I felt, of course, that ego was like, you shouldn't have to do this. Like, and that I was having that little pity party inside my head. And so then I just observing those thoughts coming in and that negative, ego. And I was kind of just observing it. I said, well, what do you want then? And I was like, I don't want anything. It's like, so then what are you fucking complaining about? Why are you even complaining about this? Is it not something you can do? Like, why are you so upset about having to do this? And I think it's why that's, I think, important, and why it's coming up to me is because, that we touched on the subject of what delights your soul, what moves you to act in life when you feel complete, when you feel like there is nothing that you should do, because that's kind of a new zone I feel like I'm playing with as well, that she kind of expressed, where it's I'm not trying to do anything, I'm not trying to create for anything. I'm just sitting in this space and letting that ruminate, and just sitting with that creative energy, but not for a particular reason. And I feel that way too. I really resonated with that, and it's weird. I'm finding it not particularly comfortable all the time, because I find myself wanting to explain to others why, less and less over time, in this new space that we're in, less and less. But there is, when I have conversations with people, there is always this expectation of, well, why are you doing that? Why are you, I don't have answers for those anymore. I'm just like, because what I'm doing. That's just what I'm doing, and even today I had a conversation with Scotty about, because I'm renovating this barn. So I'm taking this old barn. I'm trying to make this about me, but there was so much overlap in, I think, how she was expressing, and I think where I'm kind of at, and I'm renovating this old barn and into a studio, and eventually, what is being shown to me, it's like, well, you want to build this? No, I don't want to fucking do any of this stuff. It's exhausting and it's hard, but I'm doing it because I'm abiding to the force that is giving this task to me, which is hard to even put into words. But he's like, oh, you know what you should do? You should videotape it, and you should document it, and you should start doing this social media feed about like renovating, because that's like, people are really into that right now, and it's just a really good marketing opportunity for you, and I'm just like, I can't tell you how not in alignment I am with that doesn't even remotely resonate. I don't feel moved at all. And he's like, well, I just, don't lose that opportunity to, like, I'm not doing this for any other reason than this is just the thing to do. I don't have a purpose for it. Obviously studios have purposes, but you know what I mean? It's like, if I felt like I was being called to do that, I would do that, but I'm not. And that's hard to explain to people, that you're doing something that is, it takes a lot of drive to do something like that, but not for any reason. And that's what I really resonated with. I think when she was talking about that space, that if I felt that space with her, where it's like, just because I'm doing things, and just because I'm creating, and just because I'm having this experience, doesn't mean that that there's any other driving force than just the force that is moving you to do the thing.
Yeah.
So there's a long-winded conversation.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, that is, and it's interesting because it's part of the social media culture right now, and
Yeah.
the TikTok culture right now is, and is this to sort of videotape and make these videos of your life and journey. And there's that movie called Social Dilemma on Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the main things I get out of it, if I was going to surmise it, is you've got the greatest minds in the world working on, Google and YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, to how to hook people, the greatest minds in the world. And so, however, as we always say, awareness trumps everything. And once you're
Yeah.
aware of that, then it's just like your mind and everything else. It's at service to you instead of you at service to you. And so even for me, what I do for a living is sort of based on people wanting to see me privately or come to a retreat or whatever. But I so don't even think that way. I just share what I do. And whether it's for the orphanage, I share little stories. There's no plan for it. It's just like I just share what I feel, and that's what's comfortable for me. And the old me, long time ago, would have seen other people, and this is what I help people with when they come to see me. They see other people doing some of the social media stuff, and they think, oh, I should do that. I could do that. I should do that. And it causes so much, even talking about it causes anxiety and this competition and that FOMO, the fear of missing out of doing something. But if you can be, you'll know when you're drawn to do something. And I think you had said, though, to me, I don't think we had recorded it, but when we talked on the last week, you had said that Jake had offered to do that for you and said he'd put it together for you. So is that something you're going to do, or you just at all, or?
Yeah. So I'm documenting it, but as far as like doing
a weekly thing or something,
I'm not. Yeah, doing like a follow me as I do this.
Right.
That I don't feel resonated to do. I am going to document it and then have that available. That feels like, yeah, I can do that. But it's just like 30 seconds. Okay, I'm about to start going, and it's a 30 seconds of showing the progress. But as far as like narrating it and making it into anything, I don't mind, kind of having that documentation of it. Actually, Meg wants it because she's like, I just want to see that afterwards.
Right.
But what's interesting for me is like, I don't feel like I can be fully present with the project and fully present with
that's two projects right there.
Right. And where I guess I feel like I'm at with it is the most important thing is to stay present at each moment. And I feel like that's social media is a layer of distraction in a lot of ways, and it has been for me. I've deleted my Instagram account and just get away from it because it does distract me from being present. And so I'm playing with that, and I'd just invite somebody to come be in that space with me. Come feel what that's like, because I feel like we share all these things, but nobody can really have that same experience as just being in that creative moment and feeling. That's when she was talking about feeling that creative energy and sitting with it and being patient with it. That's not something you can document. It's like you got to go alone and in silence in a lot of ways, and let the creative process unfold. And I'm not dogging on people who do that, because I feel like some people are called to do that. You created a documentary for the orphanage, and that was a huge push to do that. But that's what you were doing. It wasn't doing this and that and this and it's just so yeah. I'm kind of good and sideways on it, but I think the most important thing that my takeaway from the conversation today was do what the moment's calling you to do. What delights your soul?
Yeah, what delights your soul? And I really love that when I asked what her spiritual practice or teacher was, she's like, it's just going inward in silence. I mean,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I feel like that's been kind of a thing. We've talked about that afterwards, or after podcasts, or we've had conversations about, it seems like because you are more grounded in meditation, being the mechanism for a mindfulness practice. It's been kind of interesting watching you have. I don't want to say let go, because I feel like meditation is still a profound mindfulness practice, but I've noticed that you are seeing such a vast array of other mindfulness practices, and it's kind of begging you to let go of maybe mechanisms that have pointed to meditation as maybe the strongest or only way of having a mindfulness practice. You still have your mindfulness meditation practice, and I think that's still something great to point on. But I think what's really cool is as we get into this community of teachers and non-dualism, there's such a vast array
Different
of mindfulness.
approaches. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all apples and oranges and drawn to different flavors and tastes. And I do want to clarify something. My meditation is not a mindfulness practice. So
Yeah.
yeah, mindfulness, is there's a difference between mindfulness and meditation, and there's lots of different kinds of meditation.
Yeah.
So I practice mantra meditation, and I have for 30 years. I do siddhis and stuff like sutras and things like that. But it's changed over the years, and I'm not as disciplined with when I sit and how long I sit for. I just sit for however long I want. And I had a client come in today, and an old friend who's going to be working with me in a new way. And he said, I said, well, how's your meditation practice going? Because I knew he'd sort of done Zazen meditation, which is basically just sitting in silence and a lot of focus. He used to do that every day for like 30 minutes a day. And he goes, oh, I stopped seeking, about a year ago, the seeking. So I just don't meditate anymore. And I'm like, oh, okay. I said, I just want to offer another perspective to that, because the seeking stopped within me many, many years ago. They're not anything I'm searching for. I love learning things and expanding and growing and listening, but there's nothing in me that's seeking. There was a voracious seeker in me for many years. Like India was always searching. I even wrote a song, 13 years ago. It was "Where Are You, God?" And I would never write that now, right? It's just everywhere all the time. So, but I said to him, my body loves meditating.
Yeah.
And that's what meditation has been for me my whole life, is really a deep, deep rest for my body. So there are some, I think one of the most important aspects of meditation that I tell people when I teach them is to notice how crazy your thoughts are, and it's the one time a day where you sit and allow everything to be as it is, because most of the time we're manipulating and judging and, doing all kinds of things. But meditation's like, okay, let's just allow and just be. And
Right.
so, but I don't have any problem with that anymore. Just being is not an issue for me. But my body likes it and needs it.
Right.
And I'm 58 years old, and I get, after a long day and stuff, meditation feels really good. So this guy, he's, I think, a few years older than I'm like, your body needs it. And so I think, so I'm like, if you.
But your why has changed. And that's what I guess, and maybe I'm speaking from my perspective too about meditation, is because I think for a long time, meditation was a seeking mechanism. It was, okay, if I do this meditation,
I will get this
I will
result.
get this result. And the why has changed. And I think what's fascinating is how the why can change in so many different ways, but the things we do are still the things we do. And the practice is still the practice, even though the why has changed. I guess that's I'm glad you clarified that, because that's really the most profound shift in all these, conversations, is being fascinated in even today, it's, take somebody who was always a singer, songwriter, poet, but was probably doing it for reasons, for a purpose or to achieve something or, to do a task. And now the why for her artful expressions has changed to because, just because,
It's in front of her to do.
in front of her to do, and that is, I guess, maybe it's really profound to me because partly I'm looking for that to validate what I'm doing, because that's where I'm like, that shift is happening for me in a very, live, big way. My why is changing a lot, and that's causing a lot of how my life looks to change too. But that seems to be a common thread for switching over, and that kind of it just kind of washes over everything. And I'm being compassionate and I'm being empathetic to others because that's the thing to do, not because I feel like that will add to my sense of nobility or, because it's going to change that person or because it will create a better society, all of those things and the goal-oriented aspects to spirituality and, the virtues of the intellectual virtues of why we should do something. And that's what I find really interesting is my emotional, felt sense is deeper. When I feel something, it's like, oh, it really fucking hit me. And it doesn't make me want to hold on to things. It makes me want to share that same. It makes me want to just let that thing flow through me, and then out. I don't know. It makes me not want to hold on to it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Nothing to say to that.
Yeah. And there was she was just a breath of that feeling that, don't hold on to the things that aren't there to hold on to.
Ooh, that's nice, John.
Yeah, that came from the ether. It all comes from the ether.
Coming through Sean, no. I love it. And I love you.
Love you too, man. Thanks for reconnecting with her. That was really fun. It was fun to watch you have that conversation because your eyes were almost in awe. It was just, you recognized her, but there was so much new freshness to her. So that was fun to watch you guys have the conversation as well.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.